Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is a kind of motor neuron disease referring to a group of progressive neurological diseases that cause dysfunction in the nerves that control muscle movement, resulting in muscle weaknesses and changes our body functioning. The advanced stages of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis affects the nerves that control breathing, resulting in mortality. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is sometimes called Lou Gehrig's disease, after the famous baseball player who was diagnosed with this condition. Upper motor neuron symptoms include resistance to movement in the muscles and brisk reflexes and stiffness. Lower motor neuron symptoms include muscle atrophy, weakness, and twitching. The lifespan of the patients with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is about 3 to 5 years after the appearance of the symptoms. Presently, there is no cure to amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and treatment is aimed to relieve symptoms, to provide emotional and social support, and to slow down the progression of the disease. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis attacks the nerve cells used in voluntary muscle actions called motor neurons. Motor neurons are found in the spinal cord and in the brain. As amyotrophic lateral sclerosis progresses, motor neuron cells degenerate and die. Therefore, they stop sending messages to muscles for performing actions. At this stage, the brain can no longer control voluntary movement, and the muscles gradually weaken and waste away. As amyotrophic lateral sclerosis progresses, it affects all the voluntary muscles, where the patient can no longer control their face, arms, and legs. At this stage, inability to breathe results in respiratory failure. 50% of the patients with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis will live for 3 years or more after the diagnosis. However, some patients live for longer. About 20% of patients will live 5 years or more after diagnosis, while just 10% of the patients will live for 10 years or more, and 5% of patients will live for 20 years. There are different types of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, classified based on their signs and symptoms and with a genetic association. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis can be sporadic or familial. Sporadic amyotrophic lateral sclerosis occurs randomly, and it accounts for 90 to 95% of patients. There is no clear risk factor or cause. About 5 to 10% of patients are with inherited amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The offspring of a patient with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis will have a 50% chance of developing a similar condition. Disorganized immune response is also a cause for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The immune system may attack some of the cells of the body, possibly killing nerve cells. Chemical imbalance is another cause for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, where the patients often have higher levels of glutamate secretion, a chemical messenger in the brain near the motor neurons. Higher levels of glutamate is known to be toxic to nerve cells. Mishandling of proteins can also cause amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, when body proteins are not processed appropriately by the nerve cells. Hence, abnormal proteins potentially accumulate and cause nerve cells to die. The symptoms of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis usually start appearing in late 50s or early 60s. However, symptoms can appear at other ages as well. Progression of the disease will vary between patients. Common symptoms include difficulty carrying out daily activities including walking, increased clumsiness, weakness in the feet, hands, legs, and ankles, cramping and twitching in the arms, shoulders, or tongue, difficulty maintaining good posture and holding the head up, uncontrolled outbursts of laughing or crying, known as emotional lability, cognitive changes, slurring of speech and difficulty with voice projection, pain, fatigue, problems with saliva and mucus, and difficulty breathing and swallowing in the later stages. Early symptoms of the disease often include abnormal limb fatigue, clumsiness, slurred speech, and muscle cramps and twitches. Symptoms will spread all over the body as the disease advances. No single test can diagnose amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, so diagnosis is based on test results and symptoms to rule out other possible conditions with similar symptoms. The diagnosis of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis are made through electromyography to detect electrical energy in the muscles and nerve conduction studies to test the significance of the nerve signals. These diagnosis methods can help rule out peripheral nerve damage or peripheral neuropathy and muscle disease called myopathy. Certain medical conditions that produce similar symptoms to amyotrophic lateral sclerosis include Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, HIV, West Nile virus, and the poliovirus. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is confirmed in case there are symptoms in both the lower and upper motor neurons. Upper motor neuron symptoms include resistance to movement in the muscles and brisk reflexes and stiffness. Lower motor neuron symptoms include muscle atrophy, weakness, and twitching.